Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 146 based on novel. So let's start. At a distance, the others from Bright Glimmer of Hope couldn't bear the urge of rushing out, but were stopped by Kia. Believe in him, he can do it. With a crisp colliding sound, an inconceivable scene followed. In front of Asmodeus' full body sweep, Long Houchen actually let go of the divine snail shield, and met it by wielding the aria of the goddess of light alone. More shockingly, the instant the heavy sword and the flagged pike met, Asmodeus' flagged pike was unexpectedly pushed away by Long Houchen. It was possibly a scene inconceivable in everyone's imaginations that had occurred. After Asmodeus' flagged spear was pushed away by the aria of the goddess of light, it changed its trajectory, and was swept towards the top of Long Houchen's head. But right at this time, Long Houchen moved away instantly. What he used was one of the most basic junior abilities used by Retribution Knights, Dashing Thrust. In a gout of bright light, an orange-colored blade projection came out. Asmodeus shot out his left fist as well, to meet with Long Houchen's strike. The ram head let out a loud shout with a delicate undertone at the same time. Against all expectations, Asmodeus swayed from the back of the hell dragon he was still sitting on. If someone else was close enough, he would find out that a wound had just appeared on his left hand. Long Houchen's thrust, which was followed by a stab, could only be described as a splendid move. And after this attack, he didn't stop with that, instantly releasing the 4 spiritual wings on his back. He seemed to have already stopped completely to conceal his abilities, as he landed from Star King's back. Asmodeus, dare to have a match of martial arts with me? Asmodeus didn't expect this opponent, visibly far weaker than himself, to actually be able to wound him. Long Houchen's previous attack's major point was that stab. It aimed at the most unpractical spot for Asmodeus to exert strength, his weakest spot. It wasn't a clash of power, but a mere borrowing of force, altering the trajectory of Asmodeus' attack and creating a gap in his defense. To achieve that against an opponent with such a difference of cultivation, Long Houchen's dexterity could already be said to have attained the peak. However, the gap in strength separating him from Asmodeus was after all just too wide. After the first sword thrust, the second blow was unable to exert sword intent, otherwise that attack would surely have wounded Asmodeus far more. To dare challenge the great me, you're looking for death. Asmodeus shouted loudly, spurring on his mount by kicking it, chasing after Long Houchen like a bolt of lightning. In the meantime, while his flight occurred, a majestic scene came to view. The massive hell dragon he was riding just before simply dissolved and instantly covered his whole body, bursting out in black flames. Everything else surrounding his body other than darkness essence was driven out. The dragon rider demon god Asmodeus was furious, but would definitely not look down on the enemy. The fact that Long Houchen could wound him already roused his vigilance. He was naturally able to tell that the aria of the goddess of light in Long Houchen's hands was not an ordinary weapon. To meet a heavy sword of epic tier with his body was not any wise choice. This hell dragon transformed armor was quite similar to Haoyue and Long Houchen's fusion, except that they reached totally different grades. More frighteningly, in his flagged pike's attack, countless black skulls were coming out from the flag, covering an even larger area. From the looks of it, Long Houchen seemed one instant away from being engulfed. Sending out light radiance, Long Houchen did not keep retreating from that chase. Still holding the aria of the goddess of light in his 2 hands, his surroundings filled instantly with golden streaks of light, giving off the feeling that he was not merely a single person anymore, but purely a sword. The fierce sword intent broke out instantly, as Long Houchen's eyes burst out with dazzling golden light. His body swayed gently, looking like fleeing inside the glowing pike. Repeated series of clashing sounds were heard clearly, as the golden light seemed swallowed by the massive black radiance. The clash looked extremely frantic, but the black radiance was unable to approach him further. The aria of the goddess of light was used on a small scale. Its sharp end kept shifting direction, and every strike from it utilized a method of borrowing the enemy's force, instead of meeting the dragon rider demon god with force. The flagged pike in Asmodeus' hand was continuously pushed away, while these black skulls were unexpectedly cleansed by the golden flames released from Long Houchen's body. Asmodeus' eyes were filled with shock. He did not expect at all that this ant-like opponent would show such great technique. Even with his strength, facing Long Houchen made him feel somewhat unable to muster his force. Every one of Long Houchen's sword strikes aimed at his weakest spot, and as a matter of course, the constantly deflected flagged spear was unable to muster the slightest of its offensive power. A 1 or 2 times occurrence could be called coincidence, but when not a single of his attacks in wide area managed to land on Long Houchen, how could this be called coincidence? It was as if Long Houchen had another eye, able to spot instantly any of his weak points. Actually, even Long Houchen's comrades weren't aware that Long Houchen's greatest spot of expertise was absolutely not offense but defense. Although he practiced both retribution and guardian paths as knight, never forget the choice he made at the time his father had asked him. Over these 2 years, Long Houchen did not really train in retribution knight abilities, but chose to focus entirely in the guardian knight specialization. Although he was confronting the enemy with a sword right now, in practice he was purely defending. That year, while still in Oden town, when Long Houchen was trained by his father, his first lesson had him deal with extremely terrifying ants. During every day spent confronting countless numbers of them in their cave, only able to rely on the bamboo sword in his hand, being unable to block the assaults of the ants would subject him to an incomparable pain. Long Houchen was already starting to train his defensive techniques since then. Before Long Xingyu departed, his dexterity already made some attainments. Without the use of spiritual energy, even Long Xingyu was unable to breach through Long Houchen's defense. Could this defensive technique be categorized as a retribution knight or a guardian knight skills? In Long Houchen's heart, that was concluded to be a guardian knight skills. These many years, through the constant increase of his strength, martial arts, and deepened comprehension, plus the long training in the Tower of Eternity, Long Houchen had gained great martial attainments. Even at his current cultivation level, winning now against the Dragon Rider demon god Asmodeus was not an impossible feat. In case they contested only in martial skills, Asmodeus would not have an easy time prevailing. With their previous lesson, Asmodeus did not dare put everything in offense. Long Houchen's attack gave him the feeling that in case he revealed a gap, his sword and body joining as one would immediately make use of it. Of course, Asmodeus had a lot of ways to contain Long Houchen's martial skills, but as a demon god specialized in lone fighting strength, how could he not be thrilled by meeting with an opponent such as Long Houchen? For a moment, he was even unwilling to use his more powerful abilities to annihilate him faster, to make it a contest of mere martial arts. The black and golden color in the sky made fiery clashes, with no one able to deal damage to the opponent. Long Houchen used all he had to constrain Asmodeus, and that was the most important part of their plan. As long as he could contain the Dragon Rider demon god, his comrades would smoothly fulfill the rest of the plan. Of course, it was not as if Long Houchen was going all out either. He had other trump cards. Asmodeus was ranked as the 32nd demon god, so in case he were to use a really powerful ability, Long Houchen naturally had to keep some strength to respond. At the very moment, since he was displaying his 4 wings, he didn't have the intention to hide his identity. The demon god Emperor was approaching the Exorcist Mountain Pass on the basis of Vasago's prediction. He even planned to borrow Asmodeus' mouth to communicate his movements to the demon god Emperor at the time he arrives, to relieve the Exorcist Mountain Pass from danger. That was a part of their plan. While Long Houchen and the Dragon Rider demon god were fighting ardently, the magical beast army was also reaching its last moments. Only 30 of the over 500 magical beasts were left, but all were reaching at least the 7th rank. Due to their onslaught, the Ox Demon's rank suffered terrible damage. However, be it in attack or defense, Ox Demons were valiant opponents. Like elephants facing the bites of many ants, they showed no fear in front of the deadly attacks, and lessened unceasingly these magical beasts' numbers. Right at this time, a change suddenly occurred. From the rear of these magical beasts suddenly appeared a group led by a man wielding a blood-red heavy sword. With a roar, he rushed out brazenly, as the heavy sword in his hand flashed out, lacerating several Ox Demons with the launch of his massive golden rays, rushing into the ranks of the demons like a sharp dagger. Not only that, but 2 even more valiant figures broke out from the sidelines, glowing in silver light on the left side and golden light on the right side. Everywhere the silver radiance sprinkled, everything, be it the weapons in the Ox Demon's hands or their bodies, was instantly reduced to pieces. In the meantime, a massive silvery glow of light producing ear-piercing woo sounds flew out, ready to sweep past the Ox Demons. 4 more burst out after the first one. The other side scene was even more mystifying. That golden light came from the bursts of power from a massive golden metallic ball. Everywhere it passed, thunderous explosions were heard. The Ox Demons were not given the slightest opportunity to approach, and immediately torn to shreds. Beside these 3 was a mage standing proudly at the back. Waving the staff in his hand, he launched at once 12 bursting fireballs scattering all around, aiming for the most crowded areas in the ranks of the Ox Demons. Those blue fireballs were like blue specters. Even the small specks of impurity in their way were instantly cleansed, and their explosion caused instant deflagrations. At the rear of the mage was another knight, wielding a heavy shield in his left hand and a heavy sword in his right hand. Their appearance was just too sudden, and their burst of power far too tyrannical, especially that mage whose attacks covered an immense scope. All the bursting fireballs produced over a dozen casualties for the Ox Demons. The bursts opened long paths through them, and the Ox Demon army sank into chaos. Without a doubt, the five of them who were opening a path were Han Yu, Wang Yuan, and Simas Yan on the sidelines, Lin Xin in the center and Zhong Fangfang in the rear. At the same time the five of them made that display of power, a resonant dragon cry abruptly rang out. Immediately, a gigantic black dragon rose, flying toward the army of demons. In the sky, this black dragon extending over more than 10 meters corroded over 100 Ox Demons in every breath. On its back was standing a girl, glinting in dense twisting waves. By watching carefully, one would take notice that these twisting waves transformed into ripples entering the black dragon's body from below. A devil dragon. If Han Yu's assault was still not enough to throw the Ox Demon army into disorder, but only created some confusion, this time the appearance of this devil dragon alongside them immediately broke their center of command. For a moment, the Ox Demon army did not even know whether they should respond or escape. In these circumstances, the members of Bright Glimmer of Hope entered among their ranks, aiming for the caged carriage. Obviously, the Ox Demon army was not devoid of intelligence. Some especially large Ox Demon powerhouses were guarding the cage. One of them immediately shouted in rage, and grabbed the iron bars, climbed onto the cage. Seeing that the enemies were aiming at the two prisoners, and furthermore were considerably powerful humans, they already made their preparations to execute the prisoners before they would be taken back. Dense grey radiance flashed, traveling through the left shoulder to the right side of the Ox Demon's waist. In a strike, the corpse was cut in two and immediately fell from the cage. A sweet figure appeared on top of the cage. Clad in a long black skirt, and carrying a black sickle. A dense killing intent was flourishingly dispersed. With a sweep of the massive sickle, the Ox Demons guarding the cage were thoroughly killed in a split second. This Ox Demons overall were pretty strong, but weren't formed with any particularly outstanding powerhouses. Outside of the dragon rider demon god Asmodeus, the strongest Ox Demons were only at the 6th or 7th step at most. Could such Ox Demons even give any troubles to Kia? In Long Houchen's plan, attracting Asmodeus came first, and then his comrades would launch an assault. After all, by relying on Kia alone, although approaching the cage was no issue, carrying the two men away in the midst of this army of 10,000 men would be difficult. After Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi were caught for so many days, their body states could be well imagined, they would hardly be even able to stand. Their top priority being naturally to ensure the safety of the two, Kia's mission was to ensure that Duan Yi and Yang Wenjiao wouldn't suffer any harm before the others arrived. Taking advantage of the Ox Demons in the surroundings having yet to reach out, the sickle of the god of death was waved, cutting the cages like tofu and turning them into fragments without injuring Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi in the slightest. The two of them were caught in a state of unconsciousness since long ago. Having lost the support of the cage, they fell limply on the carriage. Kia rushed forward, placing medicine that Lin Xin had priorly handed over to her. After putting them in a supine position, the pills naturally liquefied in their bodies. The Devil Dragon's appearance caused a massive shock to the Ox Demon army, to the extent that not many Ox Demons took notice of Cai's attack when she came to rescue Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi. Without a doubt, that Devil Dragon was McDull's transformation. Although Chen Yinga had just used the full power of Creature Summoning Gate with her time-folding spiritual stove, that was with the backing of her spiritual saint robe, so she still retained fighting strength. McDull's transformation was now not only limited to appearance like before. Under the backing of the spiritual saint robe's spiritual energy, he not only didn't need to devour magical crystals, but could even display the strength of a magical beast of the 9th step for a limited time. Piercing through the skies, he rapidly joined Kia's location. Grabbing one of them in each hand, Kia soared, and placed Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi on McDull's back, then the defying devil dragon swiftly flapped its wings, letting out other breaths after turning round, helping Han Yu's group to sweep clean the enemy's ranks. Han Yu's group of 5 now seized the opportunity to gather thanks to their spiritual wings. Ox Demons were not a race with the ability of flight. Adding to that the shock caused by the defying devil dragon, the course of their actions went very smoothly, rapidly gathering together in the skies. This activity naturally caught Asmodeus' attention. From the burst of power of the 5 of them, to Kia's act of rescue and the flight of the devil dragon, only about 1 minute had passed. Asmodeus was originally fighting to his heart's content and felt even a bit unwilling to pour out more of his spiritual energy. That was because he wasn't in the slightest hurry to kill Long Houchen. He was aware of the benefit he gained in this pure clash of martial technique against Long Houchen. Long Houchen's technique was close to the state of perfection and had brought him considerable enlightenment. But the appearance of that devil dragon's aura gave him the realization of something fishy. Lured away from their objectives, I have been fooled. Asmodeus immediately determined the correct outcome. He couldn't continue to be entangled with Long Houchen anymore, and with a roar of rage, the flagged pike suddenly caused the air to stagnate and immediately burst out with black flames, turning into huge pillars of fire exceeding 5 meters in diameter and bombarding Long Houchen. Due to the effects of the Saint's spiritual stove, he had to kill Long Houchen first to be able to handle the other matter. The terrifying black flames gave off a feeling of stickiness. That instant, Long Houchen felt like he had entered a world of darkness, totally devoid of light. That choking feeling was close to the pain felt at the time of the demon god of death Samanaga's suppression. This was a strike visibly prepared a long time prior by Asmodeus, especially prepared to counter Long Houchen's technique. Your martial arts are brilliant, but what can it do in front of the suppression of absolute spiritual energy? That was the method of using overwhelming power. After launching this attack, Asmodeus almost immediately walked away in haste, flying back toward his army. The defying devil dragon's appearance shocked him terribly. That was the race of the demon god emperor. Could there be a devil dragon that had betrayed his majesty demon god emperor? He had to make this clear. But as he believed that Long Houchen was heavily wounded by his long-prepared blow, and unable to maintain the effects of the Saint's spiritual stove, Long Houchen's clear voice came out from behind. "Where are you planning to go? Your opponent is me." The Saint's spiritual stove's ability of attraction didn't disappear, and Asmodeus felt huge surges of killing intent. Almost immediately turning back again, he found out with shock that the two massive black flames were still traveling afar, but Long Houchen was still standing on the same spot, only the sword in his hand had changed. With its seal undone, the aria of the Goddess of Light was originally glowing in the orange light of the epic tear, but at that very moment, it had astonishingly turned into a multicolored golden light. Divine tools would not necessarily glow in 7 colors, but something glowing in 7 colors was sure to be a divine tool. The divine snail of sun and moon was already a sure proof of this. Long Houchen was still wielding that heavy sword in his 2 hands, staring ardently at Asmodeus. From the state of his black flames, he determined that this opponent's attack had split it from within, with no real damage caused to Long Houchen. That multicolored golden light immediately drew the Dragon Rider demon god's line of sight. As we'd expect no less from a demon god expert in fighting, this instant Asmodeus put aside all the other matters and started to focus single-handedly on Long Houchen. In his previous clash against Long Houchen, Asmodeus was in great admiration toward his extremely fierce and profound sword intent and sword technique. Now that the weapon in Long Houchen's hand turned suddenly into a divine tool, Asmodeus had no other choice but to view him seriously. A human knight able to show sword technique and sword intent so close to perfection could veritably threaten Asmodeus. Asmodeus didn't regret not going all out against Long Houchen before, as this battle gave him considerable enlightenment. He was fully certain that through the course of this battle, his martial arts undoubtedly made a good advance. Demons were just like humans in that the closer the battle, the more they will arouse their latent capabilities. Looking at the divine sword in Long Houchen's hand, Asmodeus' eyes were lit up. "Very well. You are indeed qualified to be my opponent. If I kill you today, I will bury you personally as a token of respect." Asmodeus coldly declared this as he inclined the flagged spear in his hand. The one speaking was the human head. To demons, such words were a token of recognition toward the enemy. Humans were viewed as food for demons, especially the human powerhouse's corpses, which demons would never let go of. Asmodeus' statement was giving a great honor to Long Houchen. Long Houchen didn't utter a word, looking fully at the aria of the Goddess of Light at that very moment. How come he did not wield his 2 divine swords simultaneously previously, as a retribution knight? He was originally expert at wielding dual swords, so when wielding 2 of them, he would surely display an even greater sword ability. The reason why he didn't do so was to enable that reserve move accumulated in the aria of the Goddess of Light. The Dragon Rider demon god Asmodeus was far more powerful than him, so Long Houchen understood clearly that defeating the opponent was completely impossible, and the same went for stopping him. But he had his own ways. Years ago, when very young, Long Xingyu personally explained the characteristics of all demon gods, their fighting style. Long Xingyu's evaluation of Asmodeus was very close to that of Arnan. He assessed the berserk demon god to be a frantic fighter, and in Arnan's heart, nothing exceeds his own strength in importance. Even the demon god emperor's orders would not necessarily be a target of his obedience. His evaluation of Asmodeus was similar to that of Arnan. Asmodeus was also obsessed with raising his strength, but his difference with Arnan was that while having this obsession, he showed absolute loyalty toward the demon god emperor. And he's more rational than Arnan, but maybe for this very reason, his individual strength was unable to compare with Arnan. In other words, Asmodeus was obsessed with raising his strength but had a sense of priority, which Arnan did not have. While taking advantage of that aspect of Asmodeus' personality, Long Houchen did not use his power boosts, but relied solely on his martial prowesses to resist. In fact, this was putting a considerable strain on him. Facing an opponent far above him in cultivation, how could it be easy to rely entirely on his technique against Mount Tai? But without a doubt, Long Houchen had succeeded. His sword technique and sword intent deeply attracted Asmodeus' attention. As Asmodeus was not going all out either but comparing notes solely on the technical aspect, this made an optimal opportunity for the others to rescue Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi. At the time Asmodeus unleashed that powerful strike, Long Houchen was actually long since prepared, everything was within his calculations. Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi being rescued, Asmodeus would naturally not leave the matter at that. Under the effects of the Saint's spiritual stove, he had to make himself targeted by the enemy. So thanks to his state of preparedness, although it was difficult, Long Houchen still managed to respond. While fighting Long Houchen, Asmodeus had been continuously overlooking a matter. That was Yating's disappearance after releasing the abilities of the Saint's spiritual stove. After appearing, Yating had continuously remained attached on Long Houchen's back, not participating directly in the battle. She did not even launch a single magic out of fear of attracting Asmodeus' attention, and more importantly, due to waiting for Long Houchen's order for when to fuse with the aria of the Goddess of Light. This was the reserve plan Long Houchen retained. Through incessant soaking in the fallen meteor, both the aria of the Goddess of Light and Blue Rain, Hibiscus of Light were internally greatly reinforced. Moreover, because of being nurtured by Yating through the Saint's spiritual stove, their compatibility with Yating was as high as it could be. Originally, Yating's first fusion with Blue Rain, Hibiscus of Light directly caused it to be damaged, but this would obviously not happen now. The aria of the Goddess of Light was the most fitting for Long Houchen's sword intent, and Yating was only able to fuse with one divine sword, so he kept only utilizing the aria of the Goddess of Light. That way, at the time Asmodeus launched an all-out attack, Yating could fuse instantly with the divine sword, really raising it to become a divine tool. Full of sword power, the aria of the Goddess of Light was as if it was resurrecting the times of the holy divine sword wield Yi Wushang. Long Houchen's previous Azura strike was seen as a fatal blow from Asmodeus' eyes. Seeing Long Houchen give no reply to his words, Asmodeus' look became instead much more heavy, gripping in his two hands the pike he used to be gripping in one hand. The 6 eyes on the 3 heads dispersed deep black color. The pike in his hand was slowly pointed forward, as its sharp point took in and sent out large quantities of black halations. It was not formed of flames anymore, but the flagged spear became fully as black as ink. Its sharp point was aimed at Long Houchen, and terrible fighting intent combined with an incomparably sharp killing intent were twisting in the space between the two of them. Long Houchen still gazed at the divine sword in his hand, indifferently speaking, "Asmodeus, remember to tell the demon god that I will be waiting for him in demon territory. Either the demon race or me will die out. I am the Long Houchen you have always been looking to find." Huh? Originally greatly focused, Asmodeus was immediately in great shock after hearing this. The next instant, a deep layer of purplish gold was abruptly released from Long Houchen's body. This purplish gold was instantly poured inside the aria of the Goddess of Light, then Long Houchen's sword was waved, moving unhindered against him. This sword strike lit the whole sky with a purplish golden streak, rendering it deep black. This was Long Houchen's true full-powered strike, concentrating his whole strength in his sword. During his attack, he felt as if he became one with his sword. At the same time all the sword spirit on the aria of the Goddess of Light unleashed its might in that purplish golden streak of light. It let out a sort of sigh, which expressed a great feeling of release. Right, this instant the divine sword of the holy sword wielder Yi Wushang was finally back. This sword finally had that grateful bearing it used to have in those years. With no sound whatsoever of collision, the instant the man and the demon crossed, Star King reappeared in midair, sustaining Long Houchen's weight while flying away to the distance. To one's astonishment, the dragon rider demon god Asmodeus didn't chase, but stood afloat with a dull look, preserving the same position of thrusting motion. But to one's shock, as the black color of his 5-meter-long flagged pike rapidly faded off, one could clearly see a trail of blood extending from the peak of his pike to his hand. Moreover, a large scar had appeared in the midst of the armor transformed from that hell dragon. Long Houchen's sword strike was blocked by Asmodeus, but he wasn't able to block the sword intent accumulated inside, a sword intent of real might. It went so far as to concentrate all his spirit's forces, reaching a level even he himself couldn't possibly resist no matter what. At this very moment, Asmodeus was deeply shocked by that sword strike, and understood clearly that if Long Houchen's cultivation was on par with his own, that previous sword strike would already have taken his life. Asmodeus became aware for the first time that their martial skills were actually so differing. That weak opponent relied solely on his sword intent to wound him. He, who had always believed that he would not even necessarily lose a duel against a demon god in the top 12. But now he was really certain that there's really a gap between more powerful opponents and him. Recovering the flagged pike, Asmodeus' three heads moved slightly. The ox head and ram head unconsciously gave similar looks to the human head in the middle. The human head took a deep breath, muttering aloud, "Long Houchen. Boss, should we chase? If we activate the demon god pillar, that youngster is no opponent for us." The ox head asked in severity. The human head shook head, "We won't chase. Have you forgotten about His Majesty's orders? That if we meet a human knight called Long Houchen, or a human knight riding a magical beast with multiple heads, we cannot act excessively. Let him go. His Majesty surely has his ways to dispose of him." The ram head had its eyes shut. "Boss, I think that we should go into seclusion for some time. After we reach the Exorcist Mountain Pass, let's temporarily not participate in the battle." The human head nodded, "I think so too. I have a path in view. Let's hope to find another chance to cross hands with this human in the future." As he said that, Asmodeus recovered his pike, and his armor dissolved rapidly, returning to the shape of a hell dragon. However, this hell dragon had a long wound now. Asmodeus did not know that the instant Long Houchen was riding Star King, a mouthful of blood sprayed out on his golden foundation armor's mask. His battle against Asmodeus looked like a simple showdown, but in practice it needed him to spend massive mental and physical efforts. The enemy's pressure was really too terrible, for instance, just remaining in such a constant state of vigilance, to be prepared in case Asmodeus borrowed power from his demon god pillar or entered demon godification mode. In that case, he would have no other choice but to immediately go after the others and launch the Tower of Eternity's transporting ability. Fortunately, though he didn't know it, Asmodeus was still calmly contemplating on his sword instead of chasing. The Star King's full flight speed soon passed over the demon army, after meeting with his team which went further away. Riding on his hell dragon's back, Asmodeus looked at the distant Long Houchen. His eyes all had meditative looks. That sword raise instant was deeply engraved in his memories, and a surge of comprehension had arisen gradually in his mind. Long Houchen didn't know that right because of his fight against Asmodeus, this dragon rider demon god would a short time later rise dramatically in strength, entering the top 24 of the demon gods. Suppressing the energy and blood bubbling forth from him, Long Houchen did not dare relax his senses right now. After making sure that Asmodeus did not chase after him, he finally relaxed for real. At this time, Star King's utility was distinct. Golden halos rushed out from him to Long Houchen's body, causing the rise of a great warmth. While supplementing spiritual energy for Long Houchen, warming healing abilities treated his wounds. But even so, Long Houchen's wounds would not heal in only a little while. For the sake of hindering Asmodeus, he faced all of the enemy's attacks with his own, giving up on defending. Although his opponent's offense was neutralized thanks to his attacking force, the extent reached by the enemy's strength made it so that every clash put a terrible strain on Long Houchen. The Golden Foundation armor neutralized some of it, but such a long battle involved over 100,000 clashes. Although his body was tough, his blood vessels sustained considerable wounds. Never forget that no matter what could be said, Long Houchen remained only at the 8th step, facing a powerful enemy at the 9th step, the second rank of the 9th step. Even with a comparable dexterity, someone else in the same situation would already have been torn down by an opponent with such powerful spiritual energy. Because of his relation with Haoyue, Long Houchen's external spiritual energy was far above ordinary people, which is how he managed to hold on, and even wound the opponent and greatly intimidate Asmodeus. After flying for over 50 kilometers, the group gradually landed, and Long Houchen immediately crawled on Star King's back, gasping heavily. In a flash, Kia had joined Long Houchen's side, lending an arm to support him from Star King's back. Hanyu showed no hesitation to join Long Houchen's side and unleash the ability of the spiritual stove of light blessing. Although blessings of light did not have healing effects, it could at least help Long Houchen rapidly recover some spiritual energy. Lin Xin took out a pill and helped take off Long Houchen's mask to insert the pill in his mouth. Even Chen Yinga had moved close to him, instead of caring about Duan Yi and Yang Wenjiao. Everyone surrounded Long Houchen all around. Seeing Long Houchen's pale face, Chen Yinga was dripping with tears. "Boss." Long Houchen forced a smile. "Fool, what are you crying for? Don't you see that I am fine? And how are Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi?" Hanyu said, "I have already been applying some healing magic on him. Thanks to Lin Xin's pills, there is no danger to their lives." However, their wounds are very severe. They will need to be nursed for a certain time before recovering. By chance, there is no badly damaged wound. Long Houchen declared, they are finally saved. Now that we are within the borders of demon territory, we can run against demon troops at any time. We cannot stay in this place for too long. After I regain some strength, let's first get back to the Tower of Eternity. Yes? Everyone accepted. Kia lent her arm to help Long Houchen sit down. She didn't utter a word, but the pain in her eyes greatly moved Long Houchen emotionally. Touching her small hand suppressed the pain in Long Houchen's body, as he shut his eyes with a smiling face, letting his internal spiritual energy restore his damaged body channels. With the effects of the spiritual stove of light blessings on, his spiritual energy recuperated very fast. Even the spiritual energy stored in his golden foundation armor steadfastly recovered. The others sat in a circle very consciously, and Chen Yinga went to take care of Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi. While Zhong Fangfang kept watch, the others all guarded Long Houchen's side. Half an hour later, Long Houchen's face finally recuperated some vigor. Slowly opening his eyes and letting out a spit of blood, he regained his spirits and immediately activated a teleportation with his comrades alongside. On the following day, Long Houchen was in a state of recovery. His wounds were even more severe than the others imagined. For the sake of avoiding affecting his comrades' rescue mission, Long Houchen cut the connection of the soul-sharing chains during his fight against the dragon rider demon god Asmodeus. He had to bear all the damage alone. Not only his blood vessels were damaged, but even his inner organs. The others also underwent rest and recovery. Under the group's great care, Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi's situations improved greatly. And you put healing magic in full use several times, which stabilized his body with the help of the medicinal pills. Huh. Yang Wenjiao slowly opened his eyes, feeling extremely heavy, and unable to exert the slightest amount of strength. Only the ounce of warmth coming out from his chest made him feel alive. Ever since his team was annihilated by Asmodeus and he received heavy wounds, his life had been hanging on a thread. Having lost all awareness of time, although awake, he still felt very dizzy. You are awake. Chen Yinga's voice was filled with pleasant surprise. Yang Wenjiao's pupils finally focused, seeing Chen Yinga blurrily. Seeing her in a white skirt, he couldn't help but feel startled, muttering some words without speaking them out. Chen Yinga retrieved some fresh water, cautiously supporting his upper body with one hand, while her other hand poured some water between his lips. As the fresh water was poured, Yang Wenjiao showed great shock. Yinga, his voice was extremely hoarse, far different from its previous dignified tone. It's me. Big bro Wenjiao, are you better? These demon scoundrels actually persecuted you like that? At this point, Chen Yinga's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi's wounds were very grave. Yang Wenjiao had over a dozen fractures and even some of his hands and foot's muscles were broken. Several wounds on his body connected with each other. If not for the originally very good state of his body, even if the demons didn't plan on letting them die like that, he would have long ago joined the side of the goddess of light. Yinga, am I already dead? It's really great that I can see you at the time of my death. I've heard that you were in secluded cultivation all this time. If not for that holy war, I was thinking since long ago about visiting you. Unfortunately, I won't have a chance. I have never come to understand why your attitude totally changed. One day, if I have done something wrong, please stop blaming. Okay? That way, I can peacefully go. I am finally at ease. I just really hate to part with you. Yang Wenjiao seemed to take his last chance to let out all his piled thoughts to her. At last, he finally used up all the force he had regained with great difficulty, and became unconscious once again. I'm not blaming you anymore, don't pass out. In anxiousness, Chen Yinga couldn't help but fall into tears. Hey, don't cry. It's not as if he's gonna die. Sitting nearby, Lin Xin mocked her. Chen Yinga gave him a very fierce long look. What's with you? Has drugs, bro? Are you provoking me? Lin Xin fell in laughter. Just how many times have we examined him? As long as he's given the time, he'll surely recover. You're just losing your mind in concern. I'm even doubting that his previous words were just aiming at winning your sympathy. Bullshit, he's wounded like that, and yet would act on purpose. Do you even have a heart? Chen Yinga broke out in anger. Okay. You've won, stop disturbing everyone with your noise. That was not on purpose, okay? A girl in love is such a fearful thing. Lin Xin immediately raised his hands in surrender, laughing happily. Chen Yinga snorted, just wait, I'll file all my complaints when we meet Sister Li Xin. Reminded that Yang Wenjiao was out of harm, her tears naturally flowed down, but she still held his upper body. Thinking back of several memories from the past, her eyes couldn't help but fill up in warmth. Right at this time, Long Haochen, who was in the midst of cultivation, opened his eyes, immediately catching the attention of Kia standing at his side, who looked at him and asked in concern, "How are you?" Long Haochen smiled in response, "Don't worry, I'm fundamentally all right. The wounds took some of my energy, but it will come back after recovering a bit." With his constitution as Scion of Light, no light magic was as effective as the self-healing of the pure light essence in his body. With a day and a night of work, all his channels were back to normal. His body was recovering very rapidly as well. Kia sat nearby Long Haochen, nestling against him and holding his hand, softly asking, "Haochen, do you know when I fell in love with you after losing my memories?" Long Haochen shook his head, while rubbing her head with the other hand. Kia asked in a soft voice, "That was right as the Holy War had just started, when we were on the verge of separating. On those days you were preparing meals for me, heating soup, and protecting me. I won't ever forget the look you had when taking care of me. After losing my memories, I was very indecisive, but during those days, it was thanks to you that my heart stabilized. If one day, demons don't threaten the alliance, I want to live with you in a natural environment, an area rich in vegetation, with some small wooden houses where you could prepare meals as I take care of our children. That would be so great." Long Haochen's heart was pulled by Kia's words. Taking his hand out of her grip, he held her waist and revealed longing eyes, "That day will surely come. If everyone is willing, we could choose a place to live and build a small village there. I won't need you to do anything, just letting me look at you at all times will do. We will raise various vegetables, live in wooden houses, raise some domestic animals. I will prepare soup and make meals for the children. In the evenings, I will bring the children to the rooftop to look at the stars. Without the darkness brought by demonkind, the sky at those times will be very, very blue." Nestling against Long Haochen's waist, Kia shut her eyes. This time her face of absolute beauty was filled with bliss. "That day will surely come." Kia repeated Long Haochen's words, affirming her feelings. This video will end here.